About 20 minutes in, we pick up ace-king offsuit in the small blind. Mark Newhouse raises to 30 from under the gun +1. The hijack calls. We don't want to play a multi-way pot from out of position, and we have a strong enough hand to re-raise. I 3-bet to 150, expecting to win this immediately, or at least get it down to heads up. The big blind cold calls. I wasn't expecting that at all. Mark calls for 120 more. The hijack calls as well. We're playing a 3-bet, 4-way pot from out of position. It's typically a sign of a good game when that happens. The flop comes ace-9 deuce, all clubs. We've got top but no flush draw. I check. I'll rarely ever have a flush on this board, whereas some of the other opponents will be more likely to have one. The big blind makes a large bet of 500, leaving himself with only 950 behind. This clears out the rest of the field as under the gun +1 and the hijack fold. I doubt the big blind would bet so big if he had a flush, and there won't be many flush combos he'll have anyway, although I suppose there's some chance that he has a set of 9s. It just feels like he's trying to force people out in an attempt to win the pot immediately with the one pair type of hand or a combo draw like ace-queen with the queen of clubs. I'm not folding to a single flop bet, and if I'm calling the 500, we may as well get it in for the additional 950 that the opponent has before the board gets any worse. I jam for 1450 effective. We don't exactly get snap called. The opponent doesn't take too long before calling though. I'm shocked to see that the player turns over ace-jack offsuit with no club. We're a huge favorite and don't even have to sweat a possible flush draw. We just need to avoid a jack to win a $3,500 pot. It's about the best possible scenario. The turn is the king of hearts giving us top 2 pair and sealing the victory. The river is another deuce pairing the board, but it doesn't matter. We take down a massive pot to get things started as we stack a player who's probably kicking himself for not folding to the pre-flop 3-bet. Shortly after, we've got 6-4 suited in the big blind. Mark raises to 30 from middle position. The button calls. I call for 20 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop out of position. The dealer puts out 8-7 deuce rainbow. We've got a gutter with a backdoor diamond draw. I check. Mark won't be giving us a free card. He bets 50. The button likes the flop enough to stick around. He calls. I can make an argument for folding, calling, or raising. I go with the call to see if we can drill the straight or pick up a flush draw. The turn is the 7 of diamonds pairing the board and giving us a straight flush draw. I check. Despite getting called in 2 spots, Mark fires again for 150, indicating a lot of strength. There's a slight possibility that we're drawing dead to the 5 of diamonds. The button folds. Our hand is just too good to abandon. If we're not up against a full house, we should have a number of outs. Feels like we're up against an overpair. I realize that some of you have never seen the ceiling at the win. We can't allow that to be the case any longer. It's beautiful. I call the 150. It's down to heads up. The river is the king of diamonds giving us the sneaky backdoor flush. Our hand is hidden, and a high card is generally going to be better for the pre-flop aggressor. I check to give Mark an opportunity to bet. He may not like this card if he has queens down to 9s, but he's assembling a large wager. He bets 500. There's a better chance that he's got a boat after betting all 3 streets, but there's some chance that he's value betting a worse hand if he didn't expect us to have made a flush, and there's some chance he's bluffing with air. I call. We should be best a high percentage of the time. Mark shows us his new house, and it's full. He has pocket kings and got the perfect run out to destroy me as we both make big hands on the river. I lose a substantial pot, but I'm still up 1,000 on the session. Next we've got ace-9 of diamonds in middle position. The under the gun player raises to 30. I like playing suited aces when there's a lot of money on the table. I call to see if we can make a flush. The opponent from the last hand is in the big blind. He 3-bets to 130. The under the gun player calls for 100 more. There are a couple things going through my mind right now. The first is that I already saw the big blind 3-bet and then call a 4-bet with a suspect hand. It seems like he just enjoys playing larger pots and creating action. It doesn't necessarily mean that he has a premium. Against someone like this, I'm more inclined to get involved with a wider range, especially from in position. Also, this isn't a very large 3-bet sizing. I'm getting an even better price now that the under the gun player is called. It will be closing the action, so I'm even more interested in seeing a flop. I call for 100 more. We're going 3 ways to the flop in position. It comes 10-5-4 with 2 diamonds. We've got the flush draw with 1 over and a backdoor wheel draw. The big blind enjoys TikTok. I just started regularly uploading on my account, Brado and Poker, all one word. While we're in a hand against each other, the big blind is looking at his phone, doing some last-second research to see how I play.
So you hit that royal flush. I just watched the TikTok on the royal flush. That was cool. It wasn't a big hand.
Whoa, I see what's going on here. The opponent is pot-shaming me for how little I won with the royal in order to demoralize me as he bets 100 to potentially steal the pot right before our eyes. It's a shrewd tactic, but it's not going to work this time. No. Under the gun folds, we've got a big piece and we're getting a great price. I call looking to improve. It's down to heads up. The turn is the king of diamonds giving us the nuts. The big blind slider to adjust the bet sizing is broken. He's forced to go with 100 again. No one's going to make it to the river for 1/6 the pot. I raised to 300. He grabs chips to call with a speed that rivals only the top alien spacecraft. I can't wait for him to see this hand on TikTok. The river is the 6 of spades. Like a selfish squirrel, we keep the nuts. The big blind checks with how fast he called the turn raise, and given the fact that a lot of the diamonds are accounted for, I put him on a top pair type of hand. He clearly didn't even consider folding against me. My take on the situation is that he incorrectly folded a pair once when I was semi-bluffing. Now that he knows I have dozens of views on TikTok, he's not going to be folding a pair to me again. I've got the green light to go for a much larger sizing, but I don't want to go too large. I bet 900 and get called before the chips are cut. We show him the best possible hand. While the opponent mucks, he shows what looks to be a 10. He could have had a set of 10s or king 10, but he probably wouldn't have bet only 100 on the turn, and he likely would have taken more time to contemplate re-raising at that point, rather than snap call the 300 if he really had something strong. The general vibe I get as the pot is pushed our direction is that we got called light, and there's maybe a little embarrassment that the opponent didn't take more time with his decisions, rather than a big cooler just occurred. I imagine we probably got called by just second pair. It's another big win for us. We're about 45 minutes into the session and we're already up 2,900. Might be the best start that I've ever had in a 5-10 game. Next we've got pocket threes in the small blind. Mark raises to 30 from under the gun +1. We want to set mine. I call for 25 more. The big blind calls as well. We're going 3 ways to the flop from out of position. It comes ace 9-3 rainbow. We've got bottom set and multiple opponents. I check. The big blind checks. The trap is set for Mark. He bets 60. On such a dry board, there's nothing to worry about. It's very unlikely that Mark will have better than one pair at best. He'll be drawing close to dead. I call to keep Mark's bluffs in and potentially induce a call or raise from the big blind, who's likely also drawing slim. The big blind calls, we're all still in. The turn is the 7 of hearts. I check to see if Mark will fire again. The big blind checks. Mark has become weary after getting called in 2 spots. He checks, so now he for sure only has 1 pair or worse, while it's very likely that the big blind has at least an ace after she overcalled on the flop. The river is the 10 of spades. Some very unlikely straights get there, but we pretty much got the nuts given the action so far. One or both players probably have an ace. Maybe one of them has improved to 2 pair. I go with a larger sizing of 400 to target the types of hands that I put the opponents on. The big blind calls. We got her. There's no way that she possibly has us beat because she would have raised, and we're about to be several $100s richer. Maybe we need to hold off on the celebration because Mark is getting chips out. It looks like he's going to go with a massive raise. He is. He makes it 2,000 total. This is a gross spot because Mark shouldn't have 8-6 or Jack-8 for the straight after raising pre-flop from under the gun +1. I also think he might have attempted to semi-bluff the turn with either one of those holdings. I went with a large sizing on the river, so I don't even know if Mark would raise on the river with ace-10 for top 2 pair. Mark may have checked the flop if he had a set of aces, or almost for sure would have continued betting on the turn after getting called in 2 spots on the flop if he had aces. It really feels like Mark set overset us on the river. A big part of me wants to fold because I don't know what else he could have other than a set of 10s, but I've seen Mark do some wild things. The bottom set is just too good, and the off chance, Mark is raising with ace-10. I call for 1,600 more, not loving it. The big blind knows that she can't be good anymore. She folds. We get the bad news from Mark.
I thought you had pocket tens. It's like the only thing you can have.
Wow, that's so sick.
Jesus.
I'm coolering you all day.
It's like I can't fold, but I can't. All right, nice hand, nice hand.
Nice.
Mark completely crushes me one more time after rivering another card that matches his pocket pair. I don't ever remember anyone doing that to me twice within the same session before, and Mark has now done it to me twice within an hour and a half. I try to shake it off as we're dealt king-queen offsuit in the big blind while the straddle to 20 is on. The hijack raises to 60. The button calls. I'm looking to get some of our profit back as I call. We lost a huge chunk of our stack, but at least we're still up several hundred. The under the gun straddler calls. We're going 4 ways to the flop out of position. It comes king jack 7 rainbow. We've got top pair. Still, there are multiple opponents and multiple ways that we could be beat. I check. Under the gun checks. The initial pre-flop raiser bets 120. I already don't like our hand that much after seeing the bet into 3 players. I like it less as the button calls, but the button shouldn't have king-queen beat that frequently because he would have 3-bet pre-flop with pocket kings, jacks, or ace-king, and he'd probably raise the flop bet with king-jack or pocket sevens. We don't need to be too concerned about him. I call, the under-the-gun player folds, it's down to 3 of us, the turn is another king, we improve to trips. I've already ruled out the button having us beat. I'm mostly just concerned that the hijack could have pocket jacks, sevens, king-jack, or ace-king. The hands that we're ahead of probably won't be betting, so I'm worried that if I check, the players behind me will check back, and they'll get to see some free cards with Broadway draws like ace-10 or queen-10. I don't want to let him see a free river. I take an unorthodox line and lead for 300. This somewhat freezes the hijack. He looks like he's considering raising, then ultimately he calls. Maybe he has king-jack or ace-king, although there's still some chance that he could have ace-jack, straight draw, or maybe aces. The button folds, it's down to heads up. The river is the ace of diamonds completing the straight for queen 10 and improving ace-king and pocket aces to a full house. It's the worst card in the deck. Just to add to it, in case we were somehow ahead of king 10 or some other worse king, we're now chopping with those combos. I check, it'd be nice to see a check back, but I don't see what the hijack could have made it to the river with that hasn't improved to a monster. Maybe he could have ace-queen or ace-jack and he'll check back. He doesn't though, he bets 770. It's a very frustrating run out. It's difficult to imagine how we could possibly have the best hand. We're probably up against a straight or full house. I'm in the blender.
I'm trying to think of a hand I can beat, and I just can't.
As I say this, I see the hijack start to smile, and it seems a little forced. He looks somewhat uncomfortable, as if he's bluffing, but I literally can't think of what he could be bluffing with. There's no need to turn something like ace-10, ace-jack, or ace-queen into a bluff because those hands have decent showdown value. If I call here and I'm wrong, this will go from a dream in which I had possibly the best start to a 5-10 session that I've ever had and I was up big, to a nightmare in which I'm stuck after losing tons of profit in a very short time. Even though I'm having a difficult time thinking of ways I'm best, I go with my gut that something's off and I make the call. The opponent doesn't like seeing it. He's not too happy to have to turn over his cards. He shows pocket queens that he was trying to rep the straight with. We have the winner. Queens is a hand that likely would have checked behind us on the turn, so our lead there allows us to win several hundred more than we might have if we checked, and going with our instincts on the river wins us another 4-figure pot to increase our profit and get the momentum back. We're up over 2,000 once again.